goes a long way. And like I was saying before, I'm on every form of social media. I found that that was super important. I didn't, some I liked more than others. Like I didn't really like Twitter at first because I was like 140 characters, what can I do with that? Like how am I going to tell anybody anything about myself with those kind of confines? But you learn how to use each platform and you learn what each platform is good for, if that makes sense. SoundCloud is huge. I kind of became like pseudo-relevant through SoundCloud just by putting something on there, and you know, now I have like over 100,000 like plays on there. It's just kind of crazy how that can happen just by putting it out there and knowing, you know, how to promote it and who to get to repost it and all of these little tricks to get the music kind of circulating. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
I think you did.
Okay.
Great job.
I think an interesting story to convey to you is early on I managed an artist, a singer-songwriter. She now lives in Nashville, named Alice Peacock. And she was signed to Columbia Records and was unhappy with her. She was largely ignored at Columbia and came to me and asked me to get out of the record deal. And so we were able to accomplish this. And when we came back, I said to her, so now what? And she looked at me, she said, I don't know. And I said, you should have thought this through before we got you out of your deal. But anyway, she had some people that invested in her career, and we had about $150,000. And we went to Los Angeles to make a record. And we spent about 75 making the record and another 75, which is a tremendous amount of money to promote and market this. And in the end, Alice was able to pay back her investors. We built a database. That's one of the most important things an artist can do. She was able to constantly communicate to these artists. She was then, because she made all the money back and paid the investors, they all said go again. So she did this 3 times until she had a couple of children and became a retired songwriter in Nashville. And today I consult a number and manage a number of artists. A couple of, one artist is a Grammy-nominated keyboardist and producer. I manage Frank Catalano, probably perhaps the greatest tenor saxophone player alive, arguably, I suppose. And another friend that you guys should check out, especially those of you in the classical background, Ian Maxson. He's a solo cellist here in Chicago. He travels the world, and those are my current projects. Thank you.
So I come at this from an interesting perspective because as the lawyer, typically we would receive the artist after they've gone through all the other experts on this panel. However, it's very common, as many of you probably know, for entertainment attorneys to get involved in the shopping of artists. It's not something that everyone has capacity to do, not just from a time perspective, but frankly from a network perspective. But we typically, in the years I've been practicing, about 14, I would say every year of my career I get multiple demos and things for people looking for any assistance. A lot of it may be unsolicited, or it may come from people that you know. Everyone wants to know, do you have any connections to any labels or publishers or people who can help me get to the next level? And so the way that I've looked at digital marketing and social media in particular is that the irony is in this new space, and this is very, very new. You know, in fact, most law firms are just now starting to focus on this area. We're actually creating social media practices and assigning attorneys to be expert in this space. And so what we have found is that artists have to essentially make themselves famous first, and then they might get in front of a label publisher, which is not what everyone's typical understanding would be. That there was a time when you would go, you know, perform in public, and you would hope that there was an A&R executive in the audience or someone with connections who would hear you and be impressed and then sign you. That's the dream story. Well, in this new digital age, most of the time the artists are promoting themselves. And in fact, when I go to labels now or publishers, they look at the social media and say, well, how many followers do they have? Do they have an audience? These are all factors now in labels deciding to work with an artist. They want to know, basically, would you already be viable before they then invest in you, studio time and development and so forth. So in that sense, it's almost backwards for us. We have to spend a lot of time counseling clients, and they have managers
So I come from this, from the all of the pre-media period. I developed my career in the olden days when you got a team and you ideally had a relationship with the record label, and that it was their job to promote you, to make sure that you were thinking strategically about what engagements you accepted, and also to work hard on getting your records made, and then you toured them and you supported the records in that way. And some of the issues were that frankly, nobody knew who the audience was. This was pre-internet, there were no studies, there was not the money even to kind of do any kind of market studies, and so we were always guessing. So I've been recording with Universal for 20 years now, and it hasn't changed a whole lot, I would say. However, the business has at large, and certainly the larger recording industry has changed dramatically. And so one of the things that I've changed, certainly my use of media. So for instance, when I sang for the Obama Gala, the inauguration, the original 8 years ago, that was a huge thing for me. And unfortunately, it was only on HBO, so not everybody saw it. But it was still it was an exhilarating experience to even be there and participate. And my now husband, who I had just met, was there, and he sort of said, Renee, you just had this amazing thing. If people went to your website, they would feel sorry for you and think, oh, poor thing, she hasn't done anything in about 3 years, what a has-been. And I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Because I never paid attention to this stuff. So the label had control of my website, and I went on and I said, and I got it, the bell went off. The light bulb went off, and I said, oh my gosh, you're right. If I see something or hear something I like, immediately Google it. Now, we were in that era already, and I want to know who they are. And so nobody was really paying attention to this. So we've done our best to kind of get on top of it, but the colleagues that I have, mostly younger colleagues who are really connected to social media, that would be Long Long, the Chinese pianist, and that would be Joyce DiDonato, the American mezzo-soprano, they spend a lot of time. This is a huge part of their career that they devote to staying connected with their fans and with their audience. And what I just learned in London, which supports exactly what Brenda said, I was with a group of women who have a lot of power in terms of branding. They own control of the branding message for some major alcohol, types of alcohol. I won't say who they are. And they were on their way to Davos, and they said, it's just the numbers. You could have 5 more famous people, more household names, but if their social media numbers are lower in terms of audience capture than this upcoming group, they're always going to take the upcoming group. So it's that important. So let's keep this now. We've all kind of introduced ourselves, said a little bit about our backgrounds. I want to talk a little bit about Chance, because he is a Chicago native, and he's completely turned the whole business upside down. So this would be one of the more creative uses of a digital platform, and certainly it's about this recording industry, but can you talk about either his, what's happened, what's changed, how he's changed the face, certainly in the recording industry, but also of this messaging, and also any other really creative uses of social media you've seen?
Here, I'm gonna share this too.
Yes, Chance is a marketing genius. He's literally like brilliant. One of the first examples that come to mind is when he was preparing for the release of Coloring Book. He had the album was going to come out kind of like in a few days, and he had this like kind of special deal on his website where you could get, a pack of posters, and so you'd have like the album artwork for the album, and he was encouraging people to put them up, like in their neighborhoods, around their cities, and to take photos of themselves like with it, or like of the posters that they put up. And already right there, like he is, instead of paying for a billboard, has now like made money off of people promoting it for free, like, but also feeling like, oh, I'm like a part of this cool thing, like I got to get the poster, like, brilliant. he used to go around with his little mixtape and pass it around all the high schools. You know, he would wait like after school and like hand it out to people, have a conversation with people, hand it out. So by the time he released his first really big mixtape, which was 10 Day, people were like, oh, that kid who's always around at, you know, Lincoln Park or wherever, like, oh yeah, I'll listen to it. And then from there, you know, from that personable, down to earth, genuine exchange you would have with people, okay, now I've got you, now I can expand upon that through my website or through my social media or through like really brilliant marketing schemes like that. In terms of what he's done musically and totally flipping the industry kind of on its head, it's actually kind of nothing short of revolutionary. I mean, he's definitely going to be in like the history books, you know? He's like changed the rules of like the game in a lot of ways, especially with the recent Grammy nominations. He's the only people who have more nominations than him are Kanye West, Rihanna, and Beyonce. He's an independent artist. He's 23 years old. Like the people who have more nominations than him are people who have been in this industry for 10, 15, 20 years. Like that is monumental, and he released it for free, you know? And he made it so that someone who puts their work on SoundCloud or Spotify or releases a mixtape or an EP for free can be eligible for a Grammy nomination, which, you know, completely can change the course of your career. Like that's monumental. So I think Chance is really smart about how he approaches, you know, balancing both the creative and the business side of the music industry. And I think he tapped into what was happening with social media and with the internet and really just took off with it. And he's got to be like the most successful independent artist like of our time.
Maybe ever. Can other people speak to this creativity and use of social media?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the, I always think of in artists and marketing artists, first of all, what Chance has is real talent. And he has, without talent, you have nothing. You can't market, I mean, you can, but if you have the talent, the rest is much, much easier, right? So he has that. He also he taps into something that's very important when it comes to digital marketing and just in life. He has a community. He has his close community that he champions. So No Name he takes to SNL and they perform together. The same with Jamila Woods, the same with his whole crew that he very, very much takes along with him and helps him out and supports him as much as possible, and they do the same. And again, community is one of the pillars of digital marketing. He's also
creativity of message and content is super important and will always be important. And it's becoming such a place that's saturated now by such great creativity that I think the new creativity is in data analytics. And there's so much information out there about what's working for you, what's working for other people. You have so much data to put to use for you. And I think that as artists, we sort of kind of default to this idea of, oh, we're not numbers people. This isn't going to work for us. But that's not true, right? We just need to take some time to look at the numbers. And one of the great things about social media platforms and almost all digital media platforms is that they want to give you these really detailed analytics, right? Like, for example, I use a lot of Facebook ads for books that I write. And you can target to such a granular level, and you can get so specific with people who you are hitting with these different ads and different promotions, but you also get the feedback on who it's working with, who it's not working with, who it's resonating with, who maybe it's not, and you can use that information to tweak your own message, to tweak your content. There's so much there, and I think that it's this kind of amazing thing when you have the creativity that Chance has, and like Justin saying, this mixed message, but also mixing that in with this information that is really working for you or can work for you if you know how to use it. Data is everywhere, and you should embrace it and use it happily.
Brenda?
I like how you just threw out all the books that I write.
Just slip that in there.
Yeah.
Oh, I write books.
Can you also talk to the expense of it too, Brenda, from a business perspective?
Right, I wanted to tack on the last comment to say that, you know, when I'm working with a lot of managers and people who are developing artists, you know, we kind of work in tandem to try to figure out how to take their intellectual property and, you know, appropriately put the brand out there, how do you monetize it. And we get some pushback sometimes from artists that, you know, they want to, you know, protest the idea that numbers do matter. You know, we get that feedback a lot. Well, then connect me to someone for whom the numbers don't matter. Give me someone who just cares about the product. And you know what? Those people aren't out there anymore. I've heard this said a lot by music executives that, you know, first and foremost, you do have to start with a good product. That although you do see people out there who have successfully branded themselves, and it's not always clear why or how they got famous, but for the most part, you do have to have a good product in order for people to invest in you. The good thing about digital marketing and the use of social media platforms is in fact that it's not, it's probably the most efficient way that you can get yourself out there besides spending money on studio time and getting the best demo cut and getting something prepared to share with someone. The irony is that if you combine that with your, you know, knowing your audience, that is how I've seen people succeed, is that they actually knew who they were appealing to. And that's the case in music, film, and everywhere else. That you have to be very direct and specific with how you're putting yourself out there and make sure that you always know who your fans are. Because in effect, you are telling the label, look, this is my market, and this is how I'm proving that I'm viable. And so there are companies now, you know, I'm a little older, so I'm just learning some of this myself. You know, I was born when the internet was invented, but, you know, you find that people are hiring brand specialists, and there's all these multi-channel networks, and there are actual companies now that specialize in getting brand deals and getting people out there. And you have to be aware of that, find those people, and get yourself positioned to be able to monetize every aspect of who you are, your talent, and so forth.
If I could add one small little piggyback off of that, I think also in terms of thinking about like, you know, knowing who your audience is and being mindful of the following you have and making sure that your numbers are definitely like significant. I think, you know, you'll find that sometimes you don't even need, which I think is kind of what Chance and a lot of independent artists are proving, is you may not even need that label. You know what I mean? Because it's like at this point, what can a label do for Chance that he hasn't already done for himself? You know, so like through smart branding and marketing and like, you know, really having a connection with your audience and having that good content, a label may actually not be the avenue for you, which is fine. it also could possibly be like the best avenue for you, which is also fun. But like it's not of the same importance it used to be of.
So for someone starting out, what's important? Now, when I started, it was the website. Then they said, no, forget the website, Facebook. You got to be on Facebook. And then it was, Vine and Snapchat. So what is it now? So you mentioned SoundCloud.
I think you need everything. You need
You
everything.
got to keep it all going.
Absolutely.
Well, for our clients, too, actually. So, dinosaur here. You have to be very savvy about what channels actually generate results. And the other thing you have to do is keep up with these things, because it's like the opening of a new nightclub in New York. The old joke is that there is a new one every month. It's not cool after 6 months, and you have to know that, or you're just not going to do well socially out there. So my advice is Instagram actually is the name. I think that Instagram has been the key to so many of our clients. These young people, whether they're in music at this point, again, I'm speaking from, a lot of our clients are crossing over into other areas, and so a lot of the social media influencers that we represent are breaking into music, or DJing, EDM, and so forth. So it kind of all crosses over, but they'll tell you, nobody's on Facebook. That's for like over 25. Wow, that's very humbling. So these people got noticed because of, it was first Vine, which I understand is dying out or gone, and then Instagram is where all these people are getting noticed, getting signed, getting picked up, brand deals, and so forth. So literally the key is in that.
Is it still just photographs, Instagram, or is it video now?
Gotta keep up.
I will say, combining both of those, I agree with Akenya that you should be very familiar with every platform, but it's very difficult to sustain and do other things with your life. Sustain an active feed on every single platform, and let's say including, if you go as far as like Pinterest, Snapchat.
Oh, Pinterest is dead.
Well,
It's all new information.
Yeah.
Although it's about, it skews heavily female, it skews heavily lifestyle, food, architecture, interior design, yes. And so if you're maybe not for what you're trying to achieve, there are a lot of like Christian moms on Pinterest, but which is true, but again, I have basically the demographics of every Clayton really like our Christian mom.
Recipes?
Yes, recipes, exactly.
Like food and like HGTV.
That's right, but for some people, that's a very important marketplace where you need to tap into. So I think it's important to be familiar with every single platform.
What is the
Even-
demographic? Did you all know what the demographics are for each of these? In other words, what's our classical music demographic, and what are they going to do? Is it still Facebook?
It's going to be Facebook, but it could be potentially, it could go into Pinterest. Obviously, it's a very visual medium
These are good
as
tips.
well. So you have to think of what kind of content also you're producing.
Because everyone with like aunt and like grandma is on Facebook. Like everyone has Facebook.
Right.
That's my audience.
That's right. It's up to about 1.3, 1.4 billion people on Facebook. So as much as we want to say that Facebook is tired and whatnot, it has huge reach. And
What are you going to use on your tour, Justin?
so I'm going to use Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat, SoundCloud, and YouTube. I believe that's my arsenal right there. So just so you guys know, I'm going back to being a musician. I've been on the business side for far too long. I decided to switch my brain a little bit. And just like you said, a label is not so important anymore for an up-and-coming artist. And again, you don't even maybe have that option until you really start blowing up. Then they start calling you. So we went out and hired a very selective that's who's gonna get us in the bigger magazines and bigger exposure, maybe some TV stuff, late night TV, whatnot. Then we'll focus very heavily on social and digital marketing, email marketing, and then we're gonna distribute everything ourselves directly from my basement, vinyl, some niche, small quantity merchandise, and then we have booking agents in Japan, Europe, and North America that will put us on the road. That's kind of the new, I mean, basically, that's what your label, oh, we have a brand sponsorship that puts in some cash for all this. Because the key is what the label basically has been in the past is your funder. That's who's funding you, and that's who knows all these people that can do all those things for you. But they also take 50% or 80% of the revenue from your album, whatever. Now, if you can front that money somehow, if it's through crowdfunding or it's from your rich aunt or whatever, or from a brand, then you can do all that yourself. So that's how we're kind of doing it. And we did selectively select those different platforms based on our interest and based on how they reach. So we're not doing a big Pinterest campaign. Don't worry.
Clayton, are you at all, do you miss the days when you just had to get it on the radio? Wasn't that long ago, actually. I mean, how do you feel about this?
Well, radio is becoming, it still is the number one, statistically, it's the number one most influencing factor in you choosing to stream or purchase an album. But it's changing dramatically. We all know that. We can all listen to music on demand on our phones. I wanted to say one thing we haven't talked about much, which is streaming. There's never been a more optimistic time in our industry, in my opinion, at least not in the last 10 years. The recorded music business used to be an $18 billion a year industry. It dropped to roughly half of that. And it's just started to make its comeback. France has had 3 positive years of recorded music revenue, all due largely in streaming. Streaming and physical sales are about 50-50 all over the world right now, and that's only going to continue to be more and more so on the streaming side. The other thing I think we haven't mentioned is because of all this technology, it's enabled people like Chance that are incredibly talented and brilliant to do this. Before the internet, you had to have a major label deal in order to, because they control distribution. Distribution was getting records into record stores. Today, any of you can record. You could upload your music through CD Baby or TuneCore or whichever platform you choose. Now, the problem is, because it's easier to record than ever before, that's the problem. There's more music being made than ever before. In the heyday pre-internet, there was about 20,000 major label records released a year. Today, there's that many released a month. So it's really important that you get noticed and not only make great music, but then have to get noticed. And that's where we talk about a minimum of 60 minutes a day to market. That if you're an artist, you have to spend 60 minutes minimum at your computer just doing media marketing.
Can I ask
Just a brief story, really brief, but I met with Don Was, the head of Verve, or is it Blue Note? Anyway, Capitol Records in LA, and he said somebody had asked him how Wayne Shorter was going to make money on streaming, because there's been a lot of publicity about Spotify, which is now #1, and the fact that artists who've created these recordings really are not getting a piece of this pie. And he said it's the key are playlists on Spotify. And if you can get on a playlist, you can get 1 million hits. And he said the most popular playlist, get this, is sleep. I said, oh really? So you mean I've trained my entire life to hopefully strive to put people to sleep? Thank you so much. But this is the type of reality that we have right now. So I wonder if we can so in this day of this kind of impulse to give things away for free, that seems to be where we're going. And I've seen great musicians get on television and say, yeah, this really supports our touring. I have mixed feelings about all of this. And Maria Schneider's a close friend of mine who's really fighting against this movement and feeling that we as musicians should be paid for our work just like everybody else who does their jobs. How do you all feel about this?
I feel like that it's sort of a sometimes sad truth, but truth nonetheless that the model is changing when it comes to where our revenue comes from. And for you to do free performances or give away free content if you can support that with live events. Maybe that doesn't work for you. And I think that one of the nice things about this is the model is changing, but we don't really know where it's going yet. And so there are a lot of avenues open and a lot of creative ways for us to bring in revenue for ourselves as artists. So, if it works for you to have people pay every time you put something out, that's great. There are sites where you can have people subscribe to your content no matter what it is, and every time you release something, they give you $1, $2, or $5. That's really great. There's just so much out there, and I think that just finding the avenue that works to bring you your revenue is important, but you have to be ready to at least accept and acknowledge the fact that things are changing, and the way people spend their money is changing all the time.
So I became an intellectual property attorney. Actually, there's an actual interview online, and the opening paragraph says, I was so concerned with people having their ideas stolen or not being paid for their work, not being acknowledged for their creativity. I literally went to law school over this. So that lets you know where I stand. So pro-artist that, I could pass out. I'm a member of the Recording Academy. And I'm part of our advocacy committee, so I go to DC every year and participate in Grammys on the Hill, which everyone on this panel is familiar with, specifically to fight for the rights of performing artists and to discuss with representatives, legislation that will impact royalty rates, the fact, receipt of royalties, other important copyright law issues, because you can't speak of copyright law without thinking about the rights of music artists. Obviously, copyright applies to many different things, but in my view, music artists are at the top of that. And so with that, when I counsel artists, I have that in mind. Some people might see that as a rather hardline approach. So there is flexibility in there in that we do have to be responsive to how things are monetized, how you get in front of an audience. I see that as an investment in yourself. There are ways that you can do things to raise your profile, to share your content that wouldn't require you to sell it, because it's ultimately you're just trying to get to a point where you are in a position to monetize your material. But it always comes back to that for me, that I appreciate the artists who are in a position to do that. So as we discuss every year on the Hill, the bigger name artists who might be more open with their content aren't the ones who we're actually fighting for in Washington. And so from my perspective, I'm always preoccupied with how can we incentivize people to create. And the first reward for that is making sure you can make a living doing what you do. And so because I'm hearing from artists every year who come and say, please be my voice, my position will always be that, is that I believe that when you create something, put something out to the world for us to enjoy, to change our lives. Everything requires music. Life requires music. Films would fail without music. Restaurants wouldn't be able to function as efficiently without music. Everything comes back to music for me. And there's no question that artists should be paid fairly for their work.
I can definitely moderate papers about music. Thank you so much, everybody. It's now time for questions. So we'd love to hear from all of you out in the audience and any questions you may have.
How about Jamie?
More about copyright law and things like that, going into whenever you write something and you want to put it out there, but making sure that it's protected, so that, somebody else sees it and is inspired and does a cover of it, and, this is mine, so how as a person who's putting a lot of content that's new out, would you go about even doing that?
So just a general note on copyright law. The way that copyright works is it is a protection of a particular expression. So copyright does not protect ideas or themes or concepts. It's your expression of those ideas, themes, and concepts
originality is important. The moment that you affix something in tangible form, you own the copyright. I use the word own to say you are the author for legal purposes, meaning you don't have to run out and register things. It's yours. Now, what you're speaking of is a licensing scheme. Know that everything that's created today is naturally inspired by something that came before it, whether it's direct or indirect. You know, we're in genres now, and people, you see a lot of lawsuits lately from artists claiming idea theft. And there have been some pretty incredible decisions lately. Blurred Lines is the one that everybody talks about lately. But you see these types of cases come up all the time where people say, you stole my music, my idea. And each of those cases is analyzed based on, you know, there's a similarity. In layman's terms, we're looking at, you know, did they borrow the elements that were original to the other song such that that's now an infringement? So what I always recommend is balance when you're thinking about releasing content. People who might want to use your work, you know, when you become famous, they need to get your permission. That permission is through a license. And so there is an actual formal scheme in place to help protect artists when they have content.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Greg. I'm actually a previous student of Justin Sinkovich. He's awesome. Just a quick two-parter. So going back to playlist promotion with streaming and everything like that, I've noticed that a lot of companies like radio promo companies like JMA, Independent Radio Promo, of course they're still doing their thing, they're still functioning, but I've noticed other companies such as curated Spotify promotion on those playlists, and companies that will try to get you on these curated playlists. Do you feel like that's going to be a continuing trend? All these like independent companies that are really marketing for that Spotify audience? And then in conjunction with that, do you feel like other companies that do like number inflation, whether it's plays on SoundCloud, Spotify, any other form of digital distribution, is relevant still? Do you think that has a negative or positive effect? Because I feel like it has broken artists before, even if it, you know, the audience isn't really there to catch people's attention.
So are you saying there are independent businesses that are marketing songs to the Spotify playlist?
That is correct. So there's some businesses popping up that I've noticed, because I work with a couple bands myself, that will try to get them, you know, find these curators, because a lot of times these Spotify playlist curators are anonymous. Nobody knows who they are because Spotify doesn't want you to know who they are. But some companies know the people, and so they'll be like, for a fee, you know, we'll try to get you. It's kind of like a common PR promo move. You have to pay for a campaign to get you on this playlist.
The labels are definitely actively pursuing this, but my next question is then, are they going to pay for these places then? Are we in that place already? Does anybody know that?
I have thoughts. I'm tying all this in together.
I know that's a lot of ones.
So, no, this is great. So in terms of kind of branded content, as Playlist has branded content, I think that as long as there are marketers, they will be looking for new ways to spend lots of money, right? And I think it's going to continue. I think it's going to go way beyond. You know, it's always brands are always going to be looking for new ways to hit whatever market, and they're going to latch on to where the audience is. And this kind of goes back to the data analytics thing too. When you advertise to Spotify, you get kind of this analytics package where they can tell you these playlists with this type of genre, this type of music will target these people really specifically. And so, of course, they're going to put money there because it's well targeted. It's something that they're going to listen to anyway. They can put their own branding all over it. Yes, get used to that and prepare for more. And then for the inflated numbers, I think that that's a really interesting question. I think that there is a lot to be said for big numbers, right? If you're just looking around like, oh, look how popular this person is. But it also is a dangerous game to play, getting inflated numbers, because it's so easy now to say, well, these are fake, right? There are websites dedicated to just entering in a Twitter handle or something, you know, and saying, oh, here's what percentage of these are fake, and all of a sudden your credibility goes to zero.
Right, exactly.
So I see the benefit if you're a new,
Brand
I
new,
guess, in seeing in heaven, but I also think it's very dangerous, and I think that in terms of actually marketing your work, what's the point of inflating it really? Because that might be a short-term gain for you brand-wise, but you know those aren't people who are listening. You know they're not people who are spending their money for you, right?
Yeah.
And if anyone else finds out about that,
Then you're
there's
in
some
trouble.
Why is it, I noticed in London, for instance, for years now, they make up numbers about record sales. Sold 5 million copies. I mean, and I sort of shocked me, but they've been doing it for so long that, so why is it really a problem?
In terms of that industry, maybe someone else can speak.
It's true. Shockingly, even going back to physical goods, literally labels would go in and buy CDs and records off, their own records and CDs off the shelf so they could chart and get a lot of buzz. Because then radio stations would pick that up and it would just kind of create this tipping point where they could actually make that record break by selling those. So you're seeing similar things. My previous job, I was head of digital for about 1,200 records. I am familiar with inflating play numbers, and scripting. It's very easy to get your two programmers that sit next to you to script it just hitting play on whatever, play on SoundCloud or whatever. It's not really that difficult. But again, yeah, I know for like this one artist that comes off the top of my head, I know he paid for 20,000 Facebook likes. So that's so transparent because he posts something and 2 people like his post and no one comments on it, but you got 20,000 likes. You know that like 7 to 10% of those people would have seen that theoretically, and no one's.
So it's more about the
liking it.
impressions, kind of.
So you quickly know that that's very surfacey, short-term solution. It doesn't really work.
So the danger is really that you turn off your fans.
Yeah.
It also won't translate. Like, if you have all these fake fans, who's coming to your real shows? Like, you won't make that money back.
Hi, I'm Jade. I was just curious about the 50-50. You were talking about streaming and physical product being 50-50 in France. So how viable is it nowadays for artists to make large runs of CDs, and do radio stations submissions? Are they electronic at this point, or do they still send CDs?
I think all of us advocate that artists continue to make CDs if for nothing else than for your live concert performances. It's a souvenir for your fans to take home. You can autograph them, and quite frankly, the economics of a physical CD are tremendous today. If you record it properly without a big budget, you can press up a CD for $1. If they're all controlled compositions, you can post them. You don't have to pay mechanicals, and so you sell it for $10. Basically, there's $9 in your pocket. The one thing I wanted to just add too was that what's really interesting today for me is that what's really important is to be remarkable in your genre. And I think that's how you break out. It's not important that everybody be a great, huge pop star. Today, it's possible to be a touring blues musician, or in a punk band, or in a funk band, or an R&B band, and travel and play and work and make a living at it. And if you do all these things properly, it can absolutely be done. One quick story analogy I'd like to share with you. There's an artist by the name of Zoe Kettig, and I became a fan of Zoe's at Midem in Paris, when she was one of the first artists to do this and to harness her fan base. And she travels in a van with a dish on the roof, so she's constantly connected. And one day I asked my class, I was using her as kind of a poster child for my students, so I said, has anyone heard of Zoe Kettig? And one girl raised her hand, and I said, how do you know Zoe Kettig? She said, I worked at Space, which is a live venue in Evanston. And she said she sold out 2 shows. And I said, that's remarkable. She plays unaccompanied cello, lute cello, which is probably one of the most difficult things in the world to market. But yet, she's so connected to her fans that when they booked the first show, it sold out in 2.5 hours, and they booked the next night for her. So I think and she's playing a very, very select genre of music. So I think if you're remarkable and can find your audience and in that genre and drill down, you may not be the next, superstar pop artist, but that should be very few people's goals, actually, is to make turbo pop.
We have time for one question. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tomas. Nice to meet you guys. Thank you for taking the time to be here. My question today would be, in moving in a digital age, a lot of producers put out beats, whether they're for leasing, whether they're just putting out samples. And I think that as an artist who's kind of trying to develop a sound and looking at what wave is kind of going on, a lot of the creativity will come from, you know, kind of just whether it means freestyling on someone else's music or coming up with ideas. Is it illegal to release something on SoundCloud from another producer without getting the permission if you're just putting music or lyrics to their beat without trying to profit, but you're only releasing it on SoundCloud and not putting it on websites such as Apple Music or Spotify?
Well, let me just say this because it actually relates back to what I was saying earlier. In a roundabout way, I don't believe in fair use most of the time. Again, a very hard-line view. You always should get permission to do things, and that's as simple as I can state it. There are circumstances under which, you know, you can get away with doing things, or, you know, you technically wouldn't be considered infringing. But whenever you want to make use of someone else's creation, you get their permission first.
One exception is you can't cover another song. You have to get a statutory license, but that means that you don't have to actually get permission from the artist, let's say. So actually my stepmom is a professional songwriter, and so she wrote a bunch of country songs. So people can cover her songs, and as long as they go out and apply for a license from the Harry Fox agency, they never have to talk to my mom about it. They just go to Harry Fox, they pay the fee, and then my mom gets paid, and that's how she's made her living. So there is a step there, but it's very easy, just so you know.
So just don't skip that. That's the point.
But how do you find the step? How would he find the step to get permission?
For a cover song, literally there's a place called Harry Fox Agency. You go there, they represent basically every song. And
they do? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
and you just go and register, and it depends on what you're going to do with it. If you're going to release it digitally, if you're going to put it on a CD, et cetera, et cetera. So the songwriter, let's say for a digital download or a cut on a CD. So let's say Reba McEntire sells a CD with my mom's song on it. She gets 9.1 cents for the sale of that one
But
song.
this is,
on the CD.
you're using a producer's work, right?
Right, and just to clarify.
Which is different, yeah.
This was in regards to SoundCloud. So if you're still expected to make no money, you still go through that website?
Doesn't matter.
Well, you're not covering, you're actually sampling, recording. That's not the songwriting, that's the actual sound recording, which is a different thing, which you have to get permission from, because you're creating a derivative work, so you have to actually get their permission to
You're
use
another
that
lawyer on this
sample.
panel.
Fact checking.
Yes,
That's exactly correct.
And just so I'm clear, just so I can round up Justin. Hey, yeah, he's a great teacher. If I did want to post a cover on SoundCloud, could I do that for free? No? Still paying money?
No, not even if it's free, not if it's not your own intellectual work.
Thank you.
On such a negative note. That's the end of our,
But how about parody? I just want to throw that word in.
oh, well, that is a fair use.
If it's
That
parody.
is in the category of fair use, being parodied.
Yeah.
But yes, as a technicality, yes. And I think in conclusion, you know, because we're all here ultimately in this business to support creative works and creativity and the rights of artists to be able to be incentivized to continue to put content out there that ultimately impacts everyone around you. And so the lesson here is to always be vigilant in that regard. You know, seek the advice of experienced people who can guide you through this business, and you will avoid those pitfalls.
So I just hope we haven't encouraged you all to